Welcome back to another edition of Hunk of Junk Car Mods Garage. Alright, today this is part 2 of the putting the engine in my son's car. We've got the motor in. He's got his K-member in. It was a 94 to 96 K-member. You watched the first video, you know exactly what year it is. We got our wires on, our plugs in, our oil in. We've got her pretty much sitting in there. Last video we painted our engine bay. We got our brake booster back on. Our brake lines run. We pretty much got it all pretty much close to being started. We got our BBK pulleys in. We're not putting the big brackets on it just like we did my car. That is just too gaudy for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to be putting a water pump on, which is a 95 water pump, which keeps your pulleys closer to the motor. This is our harmonic balancer pulley. These are supposed to give you a couple of more horsepower. It fits nice and tight up against it. It lines everything up. The water pump pulley looks like this, which is of course a backwards rotation, and then you get the alternator pulley with it. You do not get a power steering pulley with it because the power steering we're going to be using is going to be off of the Hydro Boost system, which you can use your regular, if you have the vacuum booster for your brakes, you can use the Hydro Boost pump for running your rack and pinion, your power steering, and it will operate the same as if you had the power steering pump with the tank on it. What we're going to do is we're going to put the Hydro Boost pump on here. We're going to put the tank on the firewall and run to the Hydro Boost. They do have a bracket that you can put up here. It's going to be in our way for the Hydro Boost, so we're going to mount it to the firewall. The pulleys will then, I'll have to make a bracket for the Hydro Boost, and I'll have to make a bracket for the alternator. Being that there won't be a big bracket. Now you can use, for the alternator, you can use a 78 to, I take that back, anywhere's in the 70, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79 alternator bracket to put on this, because basically what you're doing is you're taking it back to the 70s style brackets on the motor. But I am going to make brackets that will line up with the serpentine belt. I think it's a little bit different, but anyhow, you can use them. You just have to use a different pulley setup. The pulley setup is the one that goes on the harmonic balancer. Is a little deeper in the back. It has a deep dish area here, and then that will allow you to use the 70 model bracket for the power steering. or for the alternator. The power steering, on the other hand, because we're going to the Hydro Boost, they do not have a bracket for the 302 for that, so I will have to make one. We took and we put a dummy transmission. It's just the housing to line it up. My son has to get his stall converter, basically, to go in the transmission and his shift kit. So we put a dummy in there so we can get it all lined up and we can actually start the motor. That's how they go, ain't it? Yeah. Go this way. Yeah. Yeah, because I don't think you can put the bolt in. Oh, you can put the bolt in that way. So I can't put this one this way. Which spindle? What we're going to do here now is we're going to take and show you some things that we did and how we did them. We did not get video of me making the brackets and stuff like that and getting precise into that. Everybody knows how to put a motor in, so basically we didn't do a whole bunch of video on that. So what I did here, I used a level, and an angle square. With the angle square, we started by putting our harmonic balancer on and the bottom pulley. And what we had to do was line up our alternator, and we put the Hydro Boost power steering on it. We kept the brake booster and everything in it from the 94, but we couldn't put the 94 power steering pump on there with the tank. So we modified the Hydro Boost to work with our application. So we had to build a bracket for that. What we did, we took our angle square to start out with. We brought it over here with all this stuff in the way. It's a little hard for you to see how we did it, but we put the angle square on the bottom pulley. Now we have dampener pulleys and stuff like that on here. So it's going to be a little difficult to line it up. I'm going to try to do the best I can here. But I don't know if you can see that in there or not. The pulley here on the alternator lines up with the pulley down below, and the power steering Hydro Boost pump lines up with that. Everything is perfectly straight. That gives us our depth of what we needed to make our brackets. Everybody, you know, if you're fabricating stuff, you know what I'm talking about. But what we did, because you can't just, you know, throw it in there like that, you have to have it pitched with the motor. So what we did here is we took the level and we started out on the bottom pulley, made that all level like that. Come up here and went, okay, that's where it sits on our pulley, because your motor is tipped a little bit. So then we come up here when we made our power steering pump, made that at the pitch of what the bottom pulley is. Then we come over here, we checked it on our water pump. I can't do it with the fan and stuff in there, but that pitch is exactly the same as the bottom pulley. So then we come over here to the alternator, and we made our alternator have the exact same pitch as what our bottom pulley is. And our dampener, or our guide pulley, the same pitch as what the bottom pulley is. Now, we did our dampener pulley. That there is exactly the same as what the bottom pulley is as far as pitch. But when we made it, we had to make it stick out a little bit further than the other pulleys in order to make the belt ride in the center. Now, if you can see that, the belt is riding directly in the center of that dampener pulley. Our Hydro Boost system, we took and we started out with a plate that goes on the motor. Then we cut this plate here into a square. You can see that it's shaped and everything like that. We ground it down and cut it more. And then we got our depth of where our Hydro Boost pulley here would sit as far as lining up with the bottom pulley. Then we took and we made the bracket to go from the alternator to our piece here where our Hydro Boost pump is sitting, so that would give it more strength. So this thing here is being held in 4 places, here, here, and here, and it's got 2 bolts here, 2 bolts here, and then it's got, of course, the 4 for the Hydro Boost pump. So that made that stiff. Now, we took over here to our alternator, and we are using a Chevy alternator. We found out the Chevy alternator is the best way to go when you're doing this type of application like we did, because the Ford alternator is deeper than the Chevy one. The Ford alternator is about like this, and the Chevy one's about like that as far as the depth on it, which allows you to slide that alternator back. So what we did here on the alternator, we made a bracket here that goes from the water pump across. This is our main bolt, just like the Ford goes. And we took and made 4 points of connection on this. We took and made the alternator here. Down below in there is another bracket that goes to the alternator. And then down on the bottom there, there's another one that goes to the motor. And then, of course, the one here that goes to the alternator. So that's 4 points of connection. This alternator is solid in there. The Hydro Boost system is solid in there. Now, our bracket that we made for the alternator, we took and put our dampener and our guide pulley on there to give it a place. And it allows us to move this alternator back and forth, just like you pretty much would a Ford. So it's a combination between a Ford bracket and a Chevy bracket together. And this alternator slides up and down. This tensions our belt. Now, after we got done doing that and checking our pitches and everything, our belt rides perfectly on this motor. There's no falter. There's no moving the belt left or right. It rides on your water pump pulley center. It rides here perfectly. Now, if you look at these, you can look at your alternator, which is the closest one that the camera's to. You want to look at this groove right here on the end. Right here. You want to look at that groove. You want to make sure that groove is the same all the way around that. The same on this side. All the way around it exactly like it should be. The same with the guide pulley. The same with the Hydro Boost pulley. If it was off, you would see that, me pushing it here, you would see that belt is not perfectly going line. The same gap in between this. Your belt don't actually ride edge to edge on that. It's got a give point in it, so the belt can falter a little bit. But all that being done like that has allowed us to be able to take and run this with the tighter fitting to the motor brackets. And it runs evenly. We've taken, we fired up the motor and everything. My son, he took and put in his K-member. For now, we got the factory A-arms on there. Just to get it lined up and everything like that. He ordered the tubular A-arms, and they will be coming shortly. We got all our wiring run. We got the wire in the harness out of the top of your harness that was factory to the car. There's one wire in that harness is all that you really need. You can use a couple of other ones like your oil pressure gauge wire and your water temperature gauge wire. The wire that is your power is red with a green stripe. That is your ignition. When you turn the key on, that sends power to the motor, which sends power to your distributor and your coil. So what we did is we took the one wire, we ran it all the way around and hooked it up to our coil, and that gives us power there. We took the other wire that runs for the water temperature gauge and ran that to there, and the oil gauge. Them wires will work on the system inside on your gauge cluster, no matter what it's from. You know, whether you had a 4-cylinder in this thing, a V6 or a V8, them wires will work. So you got your little plug-in deal on your oil and your temperature gauge. It's easy to detect them wires. I think your oil one is white with a red stripe, and your water one is a blue or a green wire. So that you only need the 3 wires coming out of your plug-in for your motor wiring harness. Now, unless you are going to fuel injection, that's all you need. If you're going to fuel injection, I suggest you get one of the books that tells you the wiring so you know what is what. Pretty much V6, V8, the plugins for your fuel injection are already there. You just got to match them up to your plugins on your fuel injectors. Your throttle positioning sensor and everything like that. Now on this car right here, right now, we are rebuilding the trans, so we have a dummy trans on there so we can start the car. We do not have our gas gauge hooked up. What we have here is a little 7 to 10 PSI electric pump. And we were using a gas can to put it in to fire the car up. We just used it hooked to the battery to give us power so we could get the motor fired up. Let's see what else here. Brackets were modified for the reservoir for the radiator. This is the V6 radiator that is in here. The V6 fan. All pretty much matched up to the 302 motor. I think I've just about covered everything as far as what that goes. You're going to have to modify your bracket for your throttle cable and stuff like that. We will get into that a little later in another video. But as of right now, this is where we sit. We got to put a reservoir on our Hydro Boost tank yet. Make a bracket for that. But what we have right here right now is we have a motor that is in there. We did the belt. The belts are all lined up. It will start. It will run. Basically, we get the trans done. We can put the trans on it, and the trans will allow it to be mobile. We did it because we didn't have different things at the time, so we did what we could. So we kind of bounced around back and forth in the video, or I should say in our project. So we couldn't do video on it. But we got our car pretty much here to where it is ready to go once the trans is in it. So now we have our project pretty much assembled, and the next part will be putting the A-arms on it and putting the tires on it and rolling it out the door. Of course, that will be in another video, and he's going to be doing the rear end in this car. So there'll be more videos of the project here. We're just catching you up to date right now so that you know what's going on. We apologize for being late on videos and everything. This is work season for my son. He's a landscaper and stuff like that. So things have been done late at night. I've been in the house doing things, whatever. And so things got done without doing any video. But remember, like, share, and subscribe. And have a great day.